I'm Camille Ora Nicole. I'm a designer and writer based in Southern California.
And I'm Eames Demetrios, and I'm a board member of the A+ D Museum, and I am a steward of design of some beautiful designs, and I'm also the creator of a parallel universe called Chimerics there, and that's me. So I have a few questions that we're asking everybody at the beginning. And the first one is, what made you select this project for the awards?
This project was actually the culmination of a project that I had done in grad school. This was me putting it all together and presenting it as one concrete project. And I chose it because of that, because it was very special to me, and because I thought that it would be a good addition possibly for the awards. You know, it's like fingers crossed because it's an awards, right? Like it may or may not get one, but I thought it might have a chance, and I really wanted to start spreading those ideas to a larger audience. I thought this was a great way to do that.
Super cool. And what was so when I read it, I felt like it was part of a continuity of something that was important to you, that didn't feel like just one. It may have been a summation, but is there like a before and after to this document for you?
Yeah, so this is the first zine and a short series of zines that I want to do. There's going to be 3 in all, so that was going to be the first one. I just finished the second one, and then I'm going to do one more that's based and focused on color.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was your first project that you felt fully represented you as an artist, designer, architect, designer probably in your case? What was your first project?
First project. That's a tricky one. Does it have to be professional projects, or can it go all the way back?
Since I'm the one doing the interview, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be professional. Whatever project kind of you I think the question is about what is the project that you first felt was you?
It first out was me.
That doesn't professional or for a client or anything.
Yeah, I would say that was probably a board game that I made as part of a school project back in 2013. We were given the assignment to make a board game based on a social issue, and it could be any social issue, and the game could be based on any game. We just had to, like design it and make it, like actually craft it. And for my social issue, I chose colorism, and the board game was rigged. It was a rigged board game. Like, so there was different pieces, and you rolled to see which piece you got, whether it was a lighter piece or a darker piece. And no matter what happened, at the end of the day, the darker pieces always lost. It didn't matter how many good cards you picked, because it was kind of like almost like a shoots and ladders sort of concept. It didn't matter how many positive cards you got to help you on your way up. The darker pieces always lost, and it kind of got to the point of what colorism is in this case, specifically in the fashion industry, because it was also geared towards like making it in the fashion world.
What was the reaction to the game?
It was really good. It was, yeah, people really enjoyed it, for one, because of the concept, and secondly, because of how it was made. I made it out of acrylic. Like the whole thing was made out of clear acrylic and clear vinyl for the top of it. So overall, yeah, it went really well. It was very successful.
And what made you feel, why was that the one you were able to first express yourself in? Like a really be you in it? How did that moment happen, or it just sort of happened?
It just sort of happened. For that one, I mean, it was the first time I had taken something and given it a meaning separate from what it looks like on the surface, I suppose. So it had like that surface like look to it, and then it had that underlying that underlying current going along too. And with the project that I did for the zine, for instance, like at first it's like, oh yeah, those are pretty cool drawings, I guess. But then I have the zine, which also includes the poetry and the pieces that's that it's pulling from, like at a deeper surface. And that's the same thing that I'm doing really with the other two zines and with really all of my projects, where they look really cool, but there's a reason why they're there. There's always that underlying thing going on.
Do you consider those two different kinds of beauty? The beauty of the image and the beauty of the undercurrent?
Not necessarily two separate meanings, but there's there's a juxtaposition there that I like, where it may not, where again, it's pretty, but it does have something deeper to think about and to walk away from. It's not water lilies and it's just water lilies and a study on color, or a study on movement. It's not just that. It's, this thing is cute, but there's actually really something to think about and to further explore in it.
So that makes a lot of sense. My question was, do you consider those different kinds of beauty? In other words, like, it seems to me that there's a beauty in the current, even if it's maybe harsher or more pointed or what everyone wants to call it. And then there's the beauty. Do you consider them different kinds of beauty or different aspects of the same kind of beauty, or are they both from you? How does that work in your mind?
I actually wouldn't consider the undercurrent to be pretty. I guess that's why I didn't interpret that question quite right. Because the issues are issues that come from very ugly things that we're dealing with and trying to get past in the best way possible. So maybe the undercurrent is powerful. Maybe the undercurrent is poignant. Maybe the undercurrent has these other adjectives that go to it that isn't necessarily beauty, I would say.
So therefore it's more of a contrast,
Right.
on the surface, and then this undercurrent, even though there's something you're creating that as a whole has some beauty. I mean, speaking for your award winning, it is in fact beautiful. The thing as a whole. That's why I was wondering if you saw it as a different kind of beauty, or really as something so bad that it's more that what's beautiful is your willingness to wrestle with it. Maybe, is that it?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Cool. What brought you to the field? And you're going to have to tell us what field that means, because I've heard architect, conservation architecture, and I see graphic design and I see illustration. So what brought you to the field, and tell us which fields you think you were brought to.
Yeah, that's fun. So I started in all of this in architecture. So I was an architecture major for a couple of years at Cal Poly Pomona. I ended up leaving the program for personal reasons, and ended up switching my major to graphic design instead. And thus the graphic design, thus the little bit of that architecture background. And then, I finished school. I also got a minor in art history, so that's in there too. I had a job at a toy company, didn't like it, decided to go back to school and try to do architecture again, because again, the first time I left, it was for personal reasons. So I was like, well, this time I can go back and just essentially finish it up, because I did 2 years of undergrad. The AMARC program is 3 years, so it's like kind of like the same thing almost. I got through a semester of it, did well, but kind of really hated the program, and it did have a huge wear and tear on like my personal well-being and my health. So I ended up switching to heritage, because I could, and because I'd get done faster, and because it was a field that I was planning on getting a certificate in anyway at USC, because they had those opportunities. And I went through that. I finished it, got the whole degree, and from there I worked at a civil engineering company as a graphic designer, moved to the city, continued doing graphic design, and now I'm in affordable housing doing project management. So yeah, it's weird. It's very strange.
Do you find the project management rewarding? Does it
I
use all?
do.
Mhm. What's
Yeah.
rewarding for you about it?
It's cool to like set all the gears in motion and watch projects like go from one place to another. So this is my first time working in development. This is my first time being a project manager, but even in the short amount of time that I've been in the field, I've been able to see a lot of stuff happen and see like essentially the fruits of my labor, like trying to wrangle everything together and finish applications and keep consultants in line. I've been able to see the progress and see what comes from that. And it's really cool in knowing that in the future, all of this work is going to end up being buildings that are actually built. So it's neat.
And do you find yourself learning about the buildings? Do you still have a desire to create architecture, or are you more in the conservation space, or where's your?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. So I still definitely have an interest in conservation. Um, the issue is that a lot of the most mainstream careers for conservation in California or really around the country aren't really things that I'm particularly interested in. Um, I've worked in HPLZ at the City of LA as a SBW, and just during that time, I was like, no, I don't want to do this forever. I I'm really interested in getting more into cultural heritage of people of color, which is, a part of the big reason why I have the vernacular project, which is part of what the zine is a part of, to really explore like what things or what resources are important to people of or to Black people specifically, and also to really think about what the world would have looked like if we were able to build more and build it in our image and build it based on what we need and what we desire. Because that's a part of heritage too. It's documenting what that would be, and seeing how that would grow in the future. And yeah, in the meantime, other aspects of cultural heritage I'm really, really interested in. It's just figuring out exactly how to navigate that path because it's not quite mainstream yet.
Mhm. And what do you think it will take to make it mainstream? To take it? I mean, do you see yourself as somebody who's trying to pull this? I mean, I'm always fascinated by how, even though I respect dramatic, famous architecture, I mean, it depends on the building, of course. I'm always very interested in how people actually live, or and I think that's kind of what you're getting at, particularly with Black architectural heritage and the buildings people grew up with and lived with. Um, can you talk more about what it's going to take for that to be pres- pres- conserved? All your training of heritage, where does it go for that kind of work, and how do people support that?
It's gonna take rethinking what it means to conserve heritage. A lot of the reason I think why we don't know a huge amount about um, cultural cultural resources of people of color in general is just because the rules for preservation are super stringent and very, very closed. And a lot of those rules don't apply to buildings that are important to people of color, really, because usually they have to have some sort of integrity. And usually those buildings don't have any kind of integrity. For smaller cities that have a larger demographic of people of color and just small cities in general, usually those cities don't even have the budget to set up like a heritage program so that they can go through and study what these buildings look like. And for those things to happen, for it to be recognized on a national level and at a state level, usually the city has to do it first and put that money in. But if the money isn't there, then it's not going to get done. So how we keep up with resources. That has to be changed. I think it's a really, really great idea to really just, I think the most important thing is to keep these buildings in use, and to keep them current, keep them ongoing as much as possible, because if you have a resource that's being used, the likelihood of it getting lost goes down. And, that's with or without an ordinance.
And you used a word there, integrity. And can you, since I think I know what you mean by it, can you talk more about it? Because I think you were using it in a very specific term in the sense of conservation, and maybe other people hearing this won't know what you meant.
Yeah, integrity actually, honestly, in the field is a very wishy-washy word. It can mean so many different things, but usually they mean architectural integrity. So like, are the original windows intact, for instance? How much of the building has been replaced with new materials versus old materials? It could be historic integrity, like how historic is this building? Is it historic enough? Um, yeah, and the thing is that that word integrity, when it comes to figuring out whether a resource is something that should be saved and landmarked, usually that word is very important, but it's used differently by everyone. So it's a frustrating word, honestly, but it's extremely important because it's like a make or break.
Right. And also I think that you're actually talking about another kind of integrity, which is the almost spiritual value, the ongoing value of a building in, in a underrepresented community and under conserved in terms of grasping that history, and protecting it. Integrity, that's why I wanted you to define it, because I think a lot of people say, well, God, those buildings that she's describing that aren't being protected have great integrity, but as a term of art, it's, are there ways to kind of, do you think that the conservation field is open to new definitions of integrity yet?
Yes and no. There's definitely been talks about, changing how we do things, changing what integrity means, so on and so forth. But so far from what I've seen, it's mostly talk. It's, we should do this. This is a good idea. But the actual implementation of change is slow. It's pretty slow.
So tell me about shotgun shacks. Imagine, it sounds like they have special importance to you and meaning to you. Can you tell us more about them?
Yeah. So I learned about shotgun houses in one of my architectural history classes, and it kind of really struck me because it seemed like it was the only, or not, it seemed, it was the only kind of architecture that I had heard about that matched some sort of vernacular for African American people. We learned about it during the session, like learning about Southwestern architecture, oddly enough. But but yeah, like we learned about indigenous building practices from other groups of people, and of course, throughout architectural history, through my classes in heritage too, you learn about all different kinds of vernacular styles that came to America from white settlers. But shotgun houses, that was new. That was one that I hadn't heard about before, and again, seems to be like that only style that is really the closest thing to a vernacular in America for Black people. So I looked into it more, and yeah, I was pretty much right as far as I've seen so far. Um, and I found it really interesting because other styles of architecture, they've had the opportunity to grow and change with time. But shotgun houses, for the most part, the main thing I've seen them grow and change as is with the color of paint and adding a hallway, or people taking them and revamping them. Like, hey, look, we made this old shotgun house, like this, thing now, and that's pretty much it. And just to define a shotgun house, sorry, a shotgun house is a long rectangular house. A traditional one has rooms that are all connected to each other, so they don't have a hallway. And if you were to shoot a gun through the front door, it would go through all the doors of the house, including the back. So it just goes straight there. That's the style, and it has pitched roof. Yeah.
Cool. And thank you for correcting me. I did say Shotgun Shack. I think I got that out of a song from my youth or something. So now can you tell us more about these drawings? And how they relate to shotgun houses. So I'm gonna hold them up. I printed them out. I don't have the authentic, the collector's edition, but that was in the show. So tell us what we're seeing in these two drawings, because I found them pretty cool next to each other. And your prose is very poetic, but I couldn't quite, I didn't know which was the first one and which is the one you're doing the circulation. And just tell us your thinking as we look at these images.
Yeah. So the Bad series was the first one. That was when I started thinking about circulation, and it was really kind of an innocent like project for me to do in classes while listening to lectures, was just to take this shape, this rectangular shape, and start thinking, what does circulation look like? So, where it's darker is where more activity would happen, where it's lighter, it's less activity or less people. Um, Same with the triangles and the dots. It's not supposed to be like a very specific diagram, but it's just like an idea for me to look at, like, how does that look? How does that change? How do people go through this very restrictive shape? And as that grew, I ended up going to that third one, bad number 3, which was the first time that I took that shape and was like, let's evolve that a little bit in terms of the form, and let's make that hallway one thing and add rooms to the side of it. But do that keeping that same, you shoot it through shoot through the front door, it goes through the back door. um, and same thing where everything is connected through this one rectangular area. And the dots was the same thing, or the stippling rather was the same thing in terms of trying to figure out circulation, and where the most useful spaces or areas would be in that drawing.
So when you were in class, it sounds like you were visualizing. You weren't actually. It wasn't about visiting one. It's about knowing that space well enough to kind of visualize in your mind usage and then document it. I mean, for yourself.
Yeah.
And then did you? Are you continuing to evolve that? Because there's some very interesting thinking in it. Is something that, or is the zine really the expression for it, and now you're moving on to the next thing?
Yeah, the zine was the expression for it, and it's moving on to the larger vernacular project. That was my exploration. Those were my personal kind of first steps towards a solution of what evolution would look like. With the vernacular project, it's more than me. So I'm working on it first, but in the future, as I build out little cities or little towns, I want to get more input from the larger Black population in America to look at what a city and those buildings inside that city would look like, and what they would look like, how the city would be arranged, so on and so forth. Because my solutions, like my little drawings and what I came up with, that's me. That's just me. Like, I can't say, and I would not ever claim to say that that is how it should evolve or how it would have evolved, because that's just me. There's a whole population of us, and I think some things would stay the same, but I think a lot of things would differ just based on where we are and what the rest of our demographics are. And I find that so much more interesting than just focusing on just what I think. Like, I think my stuff is cool, but it's going to be way cooler when you get everyone else's input.
So is that whole collective the we and what we would have built, that the whole community? So when you were presenting, this is what you would have built, but then what you're trying to inspire is other people, essentially other people's drawings, and that becomes a collective that would have been built but therefore can be built. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's an invitation to start thinking about it and think about what you would have done different, based on a shared or a semi-shared past of that first thing being a shotgun house. And then in terms of cities and towns, it's more so like really thinking about where you are right now, looking around, seeing what it is that you like and what you don't like and why, and
Mm.
then deciding, okay, so I like this, I would keep this. I hate this, and I want to change this. And this is my blank canvas to do that, and you know, and see what it looks like if I have the opportunity to have that input.
Cool. Did you ever remember what BAD stood for?
No,
Okay.
I have no
I
idea.
had to ask you. You said TBH. I don't remember what it stood for, so I just had to ask. It's
Yeah.
it's better that way, probably. You know, it makes it even more evocative. And so, but I want to ask one question personally. Where is this zine available, and where is the next zine available? Are they ultimately online, or do you really prefer, you want the physicality of it, or like, and is zine number 2 done?
Z number 2 is done. They're both up online. They're digital. I have them for sale. I'm collecting proceeds to be able to purchase a year's worth of V-Ray to go along with SketchUp for the vernacular project, so I can like really, be able to make nice renderings, like really nice renderings of these, of what ends up coming out of, drawings and input and so on. But yeah, it's online on my website at vernacularproject.com.
What brought you to the Design Awards and the A+D Museum?
The email. I got an email and I was like, you know what? Just go for it. Simple
I'm
as
glad
that.
you did. I think I mean for me personally, I'm fascinated by vernacular architecture, and to see I wasn't a juror, so I was turned on to it by seeing that it won the award. But I just think it's such a interesting area that people don't really know quite how to process yet. I mean, um, not only for the issues of of Black heritage and the historical aspects of it, but vernacular exists everywhere, and in every culture. People don't. I don't feel one doesn't know quite how to value it in a way, and yet it's really essential, because even I don't know. The fact that you're diving into this is important, and I think that everything you say about the challenge of preserving it, just to go back to the historical piece, is really critical, because it's I don't it it's easy to lose track of, and yet it's this dynamic aspect of it that makes it hide in plain sight, and so I commend you for doing that. And the very last question is, what do you want the museum to be?
What do I want the museum, the A&D museum specifically?
What do you want the A+D museum to be?
Ooh, honestly, to be entirely honest, the A&D museum is doing things that I hadn't seen a museum do before already. And I already kind of love what they're doing. Like, as far as I'm concerned, they can continue doing everything that they've been doing and going on that same track, and I'd be happy. I love that their exhibits are like truly living, and that's something I really appreciate.
Awesome.